Welcome to a world of clashing steel, thundering hooves, and banners fluttering in the wind. This is not just a story of kings and knights. It's a journey into the heart of medieval warfare. In this video, we're peeling back the myths and diving into the gritty, complex, and often brutal reality of how battles were actually fought in the Middle Ages. Medieval warfare wasn't just random violence. It was deeply tied to politics, religion, land disputes, and dynastic ambitions. Battles were often part of a larger campaign and rarely spontaneous. Armies moved deliberately, sometimes spending weeks just maneuvering before engaging the enemy. Most battles weren't about total annihilation. They were about gaining leverage, capturing enemies for ransom, or forcing a political settlement. Contrary to popular belief, most medieval conflicts didn't end in huge, bloody battles. Siege warfare was more common. Castles and fortified cities were strategic strongholds. When armies did meet in open battle, it was a calculated decision. High risk, high reward. So who fought in a medieval battle? A medieval army was a complex and layered force made up of various social classes and combat roles, not just the iconic image of mounted knights in shining armor. While knights were the most prestigious and heavily armed warriors, often nobles who trained for combat from a young age, they were vastly outnumbered by other essential members of the army. Key players included knights and nobles, mounted warriors trained from childhood, heavily armored and armed with lances, swords, and later maces. Men-at-arms, professional soldiers often dismounted who served as the backbone of the army. Infantry, peasants and militia with spears, axes, or bows, often poorly armored. Archers and crossbowmen, vital for skirmishing and softening enemy ranks before melee began. Mercenaries, hired professionals including feared units like the Genoese crossbowmen or Swiss pikemen. Before any clash, commanders studied terrain obsessively. Hills, rivers, and forest edges could make or break an army. Armies would often try to occupy the high ground, force the enemy into a disadvantageous position, or funnel them into choke points. Imagine yourself as a medieval commander. You're not just thinking about where the enemy is, you're thinking about how the land itself can be your weapon. Commanders also timed their battles carefully. Early morning fog, the direction of the sun, or even the day of the week, due to religious significance, could influence the timing. In medieval warfare, how an army stood often mattered as much as how it fought. Formations were the skeleton of the battlefield. They gave structure, coordination, and purpose to the chaos of combat. Common formations included shield walls. Especially in early medieval periods, these tightly packed infantry lines locked shields to resist cavalry charges. Wedges, V-shaped knight formations used for powerful breakthroughs. Pike squares. Later medieval armies adopted dense pike formations to repel cavalry. Lines and ranks. Archers formed lines to deliver coordinated volleys, often protected by stakes against cavalry. Discipline was everything. The chaos of battle could only be survived with structure. A unit that broke formation was often doomed. Cavalry was the elite force of medieval warfare. Knights thundered into battle atop destriers, large war horses bred for strength and endurance. Their initial charge, if successful, could shatter infantry lines. But cavalry wasn't invincible. Poor terrain, muddy fields, or dense forests could render them useless. And infantry with long spears or pikes, when well organized, could hold their own. Think of cavalry as the scalpel of the medieval battlefield. Sharp, fast, but requiring precision to be truly effective. Before armies collided in melee, they often engaged in skirmishing. Archers and crossbowmen harassed the enemy, disrupted formations, and picked off officers. English longbowmen were particularly feared for their range and rate of fire. Crossbows, while slower, had incredible penetrating power, even against armor. Some armies even brought early gunpowder weapons by the 14th and 15th centuries. The battle often began at a distance, with the whirring of arrows, the snap of bowstrings, and the sudden scream of the first casualty. When the lines finally met, the battle turned into a brutal melee. Weapons clanged, men shouted and screamed, and the air filled with the stench of sweat, blood, and death. Coordination often broke down, and it became a test of individual and unit endurance. Common melee weapons, swords, not the primary weapon contrary to legend, used more by knights in close quarters, spears and halberds, favored by infantry. Halberds could hook riders off horses, axes and maces, designed to crush through armor. Daggers, the last resort, used in the scrum or to finish off wounded enemies. Forget the Hollywood duels. Real combat was dirty, exhausting, and often short. You struck until your arm gave out, or until someone stopped you. With no radios or modern comms, medieval generals relied on trumpets, flags, drums, or messengers on horseback. This made communication chaotic. Once a battle was underway, it was hard to change tactics on the fly. This is why initial planning and formation discipline were critical. If a flank collapsed, a whole army could unravel in minutes. Imagine trying to control thousands of men with nothing but a trumpet in your lungs, while chaos explodes around you. Morale was everything. Panic could spread like wildfire, and one fleeing unit could start a chain reaction. To intimidate enemies, armies used war cries and chants, painted armor and terrifying banners, the reputation of fearsome leaders or mercenaries. Some battles were decided before they began, when one side simply lost the will to fight. Victory wasn't just about killing, it was about breaking the spirit of your enemy. Victory brought loot, but not always plunder. Medieval armies often focused on capturing high-ranking opponents for ransom. Wounded knights were more valuable alive than dead. But for common soldiers, mercy was rare. A battlefield after the fighting was a gruesome sight, strewn with bodies, broken weapons, and the cries of the dying. In many cases, battles were followed by days of scavenging and dealing with the wounded. Priests and camp followers tended to the survivors or buried the dead. Now, let's take a deeper dive into the Battle of Hastings in 1066. William of Normandy's army faced a strong Anglo-Saxon shield wall atop Senlac Hill. Knowing a direct assault would be costly, William used feigned retreats. His troops pretended to flee in panic, luring parts of the English line away from their strong defensive position. Once the shield wall thinned or broke formation, Norman cavalry and archers moved in to exploit the gaps. This blend of deception, coordination between cavalry and infantry, and adaptability won the day, marking the start of Norman rule in England. However, the Battle of Hastings was more than just a single trick of feigned retreats. William the Conqueror used a range of smart tactical adaptations, especially impressive given the high ground and defensive strength of the Anglo-Saxon position. William is said to have lifted his helmet and ridden along the front lines mid-battle, showing his men he was alive after rumors of his death had started spreading. This bold move restored Norman morale at a critical moment and stabilized his command presence. The Normans' flexibility and ability to adapt mid-battle stood in stark contrast to the Anglo-Saxon reliance on a single static tactic, the shield wall. Hastings wasn't just a clash of arms, it was a clash of military cultures. William's battlefield innovation set the tone for a new era of warfare in England. As the Middle Ages progressed, warfare changed. Gunpowder weapons began to appear, undermining castles and armor. Standing armies started to replace feudal levies. Professionalization of forces grew, with better logistics, pay, and equipment. The knight, as the dominant warrior, declined, replaced by the disciplined foot soldier and artilleryman. By the end of the 15th century, the battlefield was no longer ruled by chivalric ideals, but by firepower, formations, and strategy. The image of medieval battles as gallant duels between knights is a myth. The real story is far more complex and far more human. It was a world of blood and mud, courage and fear, honor and cruelty. Behind every famous victory were thousands of nameless men whose stories ended in a scream and a silence. Medieval battles were not just fought with swords and shields, they were fought with wit, will, and a profound understanding of the art of war. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the battlefield. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our next video.